What made me decide to get help? Well, I guess I'm the stereotypical high-functioning alcoholic. My career was going great guns, but I was a daily drinker and my disease was progressing, while at the same time my body's ability to withstand the abuse of daily over drinking was declining, and I started to reach a point where I was having hangovers that were so severe I really required medical intervention in order to possibly avoid a stroke. And it took 5 trips to the emergency room, but laying on a gurney at Little Company of Mary, being counseled by a social worker, I had to eventually, admit that I had a problem that I needed to address. And so that's when I decided to seek help. What made me decide to get help? It was probably the stereotypical high-functioning alcoholic, daily drinker. I found that my intake of alcohol was increasing or remaining at a pretty steady level, but my body's ability to withstand the abuse of daily intake of alcohol was on decline as I aged. And at about the age of 58, I had my first hangover so severe that it required medical intervention. I was in a condition that I thought I might have a stroke, and I went into the emergency room. Swore it would never happen again, but over the next 2.5 years, there were 4 other instances for a total of 5. Last time I was laying on a gurney at Little Company of Mary, looking up at the ceiling, I realized that this was not going to be the way I wanted to spend the rest of my life, and that I needed to take some action to stop drinking. I was approaching retirement years, and without the anchor and the stability of work to go to, I knew that I was probably going to drink myself into an early grave. What made me decide to get help? Well, I was probably the stereotypical high-functioning alcoholic. I was a daily drinker, and I was finding that my body's ability to withstand the abuse of daily drinking was declining while my disease was progressing. And I reached a point where I was having hangovers so severe that it required medical intervention. And one time, while laying on a gurney at the Little Company of Mary, looking up at the ceiling, I realized there was something that I needed to do. I needed to take some drastic steps to overcome this problem, which was not going to go away on its own. Why did I select Thelma? Well, actually, my first option for recovery was to go to an inpatient program, which I did at a posh resort in Malibu called Cliffside. And I spent 65 days in the bubble up there, very supervised and very monitored with 4 or 5 sessions every day. When I got out of there after 65 days, I was scared to death to return to the real world. Moved back into my home in Hermosa Beach across the street from a liquor store, 6 blocks from the bars that I'd partied in for many, many years. And I was very afraid that their lure was going to bring me back to where I had begun. So one of the things that they had suggested was to find an outpatient program where I could have some structure. And Thelma McMillan, being a Hermosa Beach resident, it was the natural choice. I had heard good things about it. I came in an hour after walking through the doors. I was sold, and I started the next day. Why did I select Thelma McMillan? Well, I came to Thelma McMillan after having had 2 months of inpatient treatment where I had been very closely monitored, and everything was quite structured. When I got home and realized I was going to be in my home environment with grocery stores and liquor stores and bars and restaurants and drinking friends around me, I knew that I needed some structure in order to remain true to my goal of remaining sober. After an hour interview with an intake specialist over at Thelma McMillan, I was convinced that this was the right path for me. What differentiates Thelma from AA? Well, I've been to thousands of AA meetings in my years of sobriety, and if you go to enough, you'll pick up little snippets of information from people that you can use to help you process your addiction and your recovery and relapse prevention. In enough time, you'll gather a toolkit that will prove very beneficial to you, and when you use those tools, you find that they become part of your thinking. When you come into Thelma, they give you these tools in a very structured environment, starting right away, and you have them when you need them in early sobriety. Then you use them, they become part of your thinking, and it certainly contributes to a successful program. What differentiates Thelma from AA? Well, there's a wide variance in the experience that you're going to get when you pick up the little book and you go to an AA meeting. But if you go to enough of them, you're going to hear enough stories of people's experience. Let's start over again. What differentiates Thelma from AA? Well, I would say there's a wide variances of experience that you'll have if you just pick up the book and randomly go to an AA meeting. But if you go long enough, you're going to pick up information about other people's experiences and tools that they've used to help them stay sober. And you'll develop a toolkit that you can use yourself. If you enroll in Thelma and submit to their program, go to their courses 4, 5, 6 days a week for the required period of time, they'll load you up with a toolkit that you can use that you can begin to use early in your sobriety when you really need it. And I think that that's a very important aspect of the program. It's structured and it gives you the tools very early. Why do I continue to come to Thelma after having graduated? Well, part of the joy of recovery is the opportunity to share your experience, strength, and hope with others. And I come back once a week when the alumni are allowed to interact with the current patients. And I find that an opportunity to remind me of how difficult it is in early sobriety and to share some of my experience with people and show them that there is and can be a happy and joyful life after they've completed their program.